A very warm welcome. This is Reflections for Holy Week. Today we're going to be in Mark chapter 16, the amazing story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. To begin our time today, there's no better hymn than "I Know That My Redeemer Lives." I know that my Redeemer lives. What comfort this sweet sentence gives. He lives, who once was dead. He lives, my ever-living head. He lives to bless me with his love. He lives to plead for me above. He lives, my hungry soul to feed. He lives to help in time of need. He lives to silence. He lives to silence all my fears. He lives to wipe away my tears. He lives to calm my troubled heart. He lives, all blessings to impart. He lives and grants me daily bread. He lives and grants me daily bread. He lives and I shall conquer death. He lives, my mansion to prepare. He lives to bring me safely there. He lives, all glory to his name. He lives, my Jesus, still the same. Oh, the sweet joy this sentence gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. No greater joy than knowing that our Redeemer lives. Mark 16, the very last chapter of the Gospel of Mark. It's a gospel of action. It was primarily written for Romans and Gentiles, people of action in that time period. But we pick it up in verse 1. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance to the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side. They were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Reminds me of a teacher was speaking to some second graders about Jesus' resurrection. And one student said, "Well, what did Jesus say right after he came out of the grave?" The teacher explained, "Well, the Bible doesn't really tell us." The hand of one little girl shot up. I know what he said. He said, "Ta-da!" All four Gospels, remind us that every day is a Tada day because Jesus is alive. He is risen. And the great hymn we just sang, I know that my Redeemer lives. What do those words mean to you today? Would you know what they meant to the writer of the hymn? The writer of that hymn, Samuel Medley. In fact, his life was much like John Newton. Sam was born June 23rd, 1738 in Chestnut, England. He was the son of a school teacher. He was taught to live faithfully by Christian values, but as a teenager, sadly, he turned away from God. He joined the British Royal Navy and became more ungodly. In 1759, during the 7 Years' War, at the age of 21, he was in a naval battle with a French ship. His leg was injured. And it came to the point that it looked like they would have to amputate the leg to save his life. But during the night, he began to pray vigorously that his leg may be spared. The next morning, to the surprise of all, it healed so well the amputation was no longer needed. He returned to his room, found the Bible his grandfather had given him, and began to read. They sent him home to recover. His grandfather read a sermon written by Isaac Watts. This moved him so significantly, he immediately became a follower of Jesus Christ. He would become a pastor, taking special interest in the souls of seamen and servicemen. When he preached, the crowds were so large that a new building had to be constructed to allow room for all the people. Samuel Medley knew the grace of God and the power of the resurrection without a doubt. He could say confidently, I know that my Redeemer lives. And we too are blessed in knowing our Redeemer lives affirms we're loved and valued in God's eyes. No, the women, the two Marys and Salome, came to the tomb not thinking much about their value. You see, women in society of that time had little value. They came to anoint Jesus' body with spices as an act of devotion and love. They had no expectation of a resurrection. The hearts filled with grief, minds filled with questions. Now, who will roll the stone away from the tomb? What does life have in store for us now? The blessing that they were loved and valued, children of God, was blurred by the pain in life and loss. Many today, their life is blurred by the pandemic or other challenges going on in their life or their health or recent loss. But thank God, in the midst of even a pandemic, for many, there's been new life with the vaccine, with booster shots. In a sense, that's a type of resurrection. Oh, that more people in our nation would have their eyes opened to the value of that type of blessing for all Americans, for communities, for us as a community. Being literally COVID-free is such a blessing and has given us opportunity to enjoy the life God has given us. But in the midst of their pain, the women received an amazing revelation. The angel said, hey, you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He has risen. Without a death, there can be no resurrection. And so the world judges value today by beauty and intelligence and social status, success, talent, ethnic background. Aging adults can feel insignificant as their bodies and abilities slow down. Oftentimes, at least in our culture, value is determined by what someone's willing to pay and who owned it. How much would you pay for a toothbrush? You know how much Napoleon's was auctioned off for? I'll tell you next week. Oh, you can't wait that long. I understand. Imagine $21,000. The fake pearls of Jackie Onassis Kennedy sold for $200,000. How much would you pay for a pair of used tennis shoes? Well, Michael Jordan's went for $7,000. And what about a sheet of paper? You know, what would you pay for a sheet of paper? It's just a piece of paper. Well, when Beethoven scribbled some things on it, it went for $1.5 million. I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to pay that much for any of the above because it all wears out in the end, doesn't it? Well, you and I have value not because of who we are, but because of whose we are. God says you and I are worth a son to him. We're important enough to justify the death of his son. We're precious in his eyes, and he loves us. That's what the cross and the empty tomb prove. It proves our value. And no one ever paid a greater price than God paid for you and me. As Jesus went to that cross and shed his blood, he literally became sin. He descended into hell, conquered sin, death, and hell for you and me. And then he rose victoriously, proving once and for all we do not have to fear death and the grave or anything on this side of heaven. We don't need to prove to anyone how valuable we are because Jesus proved that for you and me in the cross and resurrection. And that's why I love the hymn we sang, because the phrases of this hymn ooze with the love and value God has for us. The one verse we sang, it says, he lives to bless us with his love. He pleads for us above. He feeds our hungry soul. He helps us in time of need. Oh, what great truth there. There's a lady by the name of Mary Ann Bird. She was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1928, but was born with multiple birth defects. Deaf in one ear, had a cleft palate, a disfigured face, lopsided feet. She had 17 surgeries into her teen years. She suffered not only physical impairments, but the emotional trauma of being different. You know, schoolmates would kind of jest, what happened to your lip? Oh, I fell and cut it on a piece of glass. You see, it seemed more acceptable to have suffered an accident than to have been born different. But there was a teacher in the second grade that they all adored, Mrs. Leonard. She's short, round, kind of happy, sparkling lady. Well, they had an annual hearing test. And Mrs. Leonard gave the test to everyone in the class. Finally, it was her turn. She would cover one ear and whisper something to repeat back, like, do you have new shoes? Well, she spoke 7 words that changed Mary Ann's life. She whispered, I wish you were my little girl. I wish you were my little girl. Mary Ann became a mother of 4 children and a freelance writer for the Foxborough, Massachusetts Reporter. And the story of the whisper test is her own story of growing up as a disabled child. A faithful Christian, she entered her eternal glory in 2012 at the age of 83. Well, God whispers to us today, that we're loved and we're valued. Our value isn't based on how we look or how we feel, what we do or have done, what we have or what we don't have. It's simply that Chris is a loved, forgiven child of God. You are a loved and forgiven child of God. He whispers, I love you, I forgive you, I value. Then the fourth verse mentions that he gives us a rich supply of his grace, of all that we need. He guides us with his eye. He comforts us when we're faint. He hears our soul's complaint. Verse 5, he silences all our fear. He wipes away our tears. He calms our troubled heart. He lives all blessings to impart. All the blessings we enjoy on this side of heaven is just a foretaste of the greater feast to come. And so the angel told the women to go and to tell the disciples and Peter that Jesus was risen. And so they went trembling and bewildered. They fled the tomb. They said nothing to anyone. Why? Because they were afraid. I would imagine having an encounter with an angel may cause the boldest of people to be fearful. We have fears in our world today. Fears of the economy and war and famine and drought and all kinds of fears we may have. For many senior saints, probably that one of the top fears is falling or isolation or loneliness, declining health, loss of independence. But the good news is Jesus silences all our fears. He imparts to us his peace, which calms our troubled hearts. He gives us purpose, no matter what our station of life is right now or this moment. He gives us a purpose. He has a plan for us. Reminds me of a little boy who was kind of fascinated as mom was gently rubbing some cold cream on her face. Why are you rubbing that cold cream on your face, Mommy? His mom said, to make myself beautiful. A few minutes later, she began removing the cream with the tissue. He said, what's wrong? You giving up? The good news is our value does not lessen as we age. And that is the truth of the cross and the resurrection, because we're loved and valued. And then we're also blessed in knowing that the best is coming. The other verse says, he lives and grants me daily breath. He lives and I shall conquer death. He lives my mansion to prepare. He lives to bring me safely there. The good news is, no, Jesus is not finished with you or me yet. He's getting our mansion, our room ready. Until it's ready, he has a plan and purpose. He lives and grants me daily breath is based on Psalm 150, where it says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. As the women came to the tomb, they were not thinking of heaven, but death's sting, weren't they? A Christian couple lived very healthy lives. And as they're getting their tour of heaven, they're walking along and they're marveling at paradise around them. And one says to the other, wow, I never knew heaven was going to be as good as this. Oh, you're right, said the other. Just think, if we hadn't eaten all that oat bran, we could have gotten here 10 years earlier. How blessed we are in knowing that the best is coming. We just know it's coming. We don't know when it's coming for us. We know it's coming. On a beautiful, lovely moonlit night, a grandfather and a small granddaughter went for a walk. The stars were magnificent as the grandfather was naming individual stars and constellations to his granddaughter. The granddaughter said, "Grandpa, if the bottom side of heaven is this beautiful, just think how wonderful the top side must be." Paul put it this way in Philippians, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control, he will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. That word transform is our word schematic, a drawing, a diagram of the inner workings of a device. It is a simple interpretation of something that is often very complex. Well, one day, God is going to re-schematic our earthly bodies. We'll be given a glorified body like that of Jesus Christ. I don't know about you, but I like the sound of that. And then John reminds us in Revelation, one day there'll be no more death, mourning, crying, or pain, for the old order of things have passed away. One day the trappings of this flesh will no longer be an issue. Yes, one day when we're with Jesus, there'll be no more aging or Alzheimer's. There'll be no more baldness, backache, bugs, broken bones, or bad news. There'll be no more cancer or cemeteries or COVID-19. There'll be no more disappointments or the devil. There'll be no more evil or eyeglasses or earthquakes. There'll be no more funerals or false teeth or fighting. There'll be no more grief or goodbyes. There'll be no more hearing aids or hospitals or high blood pressure. There'll be no more illness or jails, mosquitoes or mistakes. No more Parkinson's, pandemics. No more wheelchairs. And the list goes on and on and on. No more. A pastor's wife told her husband to never look under the bed on their wedding day. Well, the years go by. While his wife was at the store, he became overwhelmed with curiosity. And so he found a half dozen eggs and $5,000 in cash. When she got home, he asked her about it. "Okay, if you must know," she said, "the eggs represent your bad sermons." That's not bad for 25 years of sermons, he thought. "Well, what's with the $5,000? She said, "Well, every time I got a dozen, I sold them." Thank God, no more bad news or bad sermons. Thanks for putting up with me and the reflections on this side of heaven. A bulletin announcement said, "Easter sunrise service, 6 p.m. No excuses for late risers." Oh, one day there'll be no more excuses. No more suffering, pain, or death. You know, there's a true story of a 26-year-old mom. She was staring at her 6-year-old son dying of terminal leukemia. She said, "Billy, you ever think about what you wanted to be once you grew up?" "Oh, Mommy, I always wanted to be a fireman." Well, she called her local fire department, went down there, and at the department she met Fireman Bob. She explained her son's final wish and asked if he might ride around the block on the fire engine. Well, Fireman Bob picks up Billy, dresses him in a fireman uniform. He escorted him from the hospital bed to the waiting hook and ladder truck. Billy got to sit on the back of the truck and help steer it back to the fire station. Oh, what a blast he was having. He was also videotaped for the local news program. Well, having his dream come true, he lived 3 months longer than the doctors thought possible. But one night, all his vital signs began to drop dramatically. The nurse called the fire chief and asked to send a fireman in uniform to be with Billy as she was instructed. Fireman Bob responded, "We'll be there in 5 minutes. Please do me a favor. When you hear the sirens and see the lights flashing, will you announce it's not a fire? It's just the fire department coming to see one of its finest members one more time." Opened the window to his room. 16 firefighters climbed up the ladder into Billy's room, and with Mom's permission, they hugged him and held him and told him how much they loved him. With his dying breath, Billy looked up at Fireman Bob. "Am I really a fireman now?" Bob said, "Billy, you are, and the head chief Jesus is holding your hand." With a big smile, Billy said, "I know. He's been holding my hand all day, and the angels have been singing. Death, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? Thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ." There's a little poem called "'Twas the Night Before Easter." It goes like this. "'Twas the night before Easter, and all through the land the demons were celebrating their bold crucifixion plan. The disciples were hiding, all huddled in fear, nervously wondering if their end was near. The children at bedtime were still asking why such a sweet, gentle man had been sentenced to die. With moms getting ready to join dads in bed, they tried to explain while Jesus was dead. When down in the grave there rose such a clatter, old Satan was pacing, screaming, 'What is the matter?' He found the death angel and asked for the keys, but they had been taken and his prisoner released. That to his wondering eyes would appear that his kingdom was conquered became frighteningly clear. More deadly than serpents Christ's enemies came, but he pointed and shouted and called them by name. Now sickness, now sin, death, poverty, and pain, you are defeated. Don't you come back again to the bottomless pit, to the lake filled with fire. Satan, you're headed, you thief and you liar. Christ was dressed all in white from his head to his feet. He had soundly defeated the master of deceit. The sins of the world Jesus bore on his back. Now he looks like the champion who spoiled their attack. He sprang to his throne, to his enemies bade farewell, and away he departed, leaving death and sin in hell. But he would exclaim as they saw he'd survive, "Today's Easter, I'm not dead, I'm alive." That's why we sing with joy, "I know that my Redeemer lives." Let's sing and close with a few more of those verses one more time. I know that my Redeemer lives. What comfort this sweet sentence gives. He lives, who once was dead. He lives, my ever-living head. He lives and grants me daily breath. He lives and I shall conquer death. He lives, my mansion to prepare. He lives to bring me safely there. He lives, all glory to his name. He lives, my Jesus, still the same. Oh, the sweet joy this sentence gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. May the truth, "I know my Redeemer lives," empower you today and all days. Till we meet again, the best is coming.